When I had just given birth to long-flung twins, my body was still weak, but my husband, Tin Nin Hao, brought back a pregnant woman, forcing me to accept her right in front of the delivery room door. I was just stunned for a moment, then replied cheerfully. Later, when my parents found out about it, they were angry and wanted to seek justice on my behalf, but I smiled and only advised them to return home, because I knew Tin Nin Hao would not live much longer. As for that woman, she can only be a concubine for the rest of her life, and is oppressed by my wife Tin Nin Hao. Living is not the same as dying. My husband's voice continued to echo outside the delivery room window, along with the woman's sobbing and pleading sounds. If you don't know clearly, anyone who hears will think that I am the deceased seventh lady of Tin Nin Hao Fu. The maid Xian Lam gently covered my ear and consoled me in a low voice. Madam, don't listen, don't get excited at this time, you will easily get complications. Looking at her red eyes, I couldn't help but sigh. I naturally know that after giving birth, I absolutely cannot be excited. In my previous life, after giving birth, the pregnancy was extremely difficult, and I had to endure my husband's coldness and betrayal, making me even more angry because of his excessive contempt. That anger made me so angry that I almost lost my life. Fortunately, out of concern for me, my parents brought precious 100-year-old ginseng to visit, which saved my life, but because of that, my body was damaged and gradually weakened. Even though my mother's family regularly brought nutritious food, I still could not survive the following winter, and I died with countless resentments. The soul did not escape, hovering day and night in the Tin Nin Hao Palace, witnessing with his own eyes that less than 3 months after my death, the deceased solemnly welcomed that woman and her son into the palace. The day she gave birth, because of my strong opposition, she could not enter the door to be my concubine. Thanks to that, taking the opportunity of my death, she officially became the seventh lady. Not long after that, he also died on the battlefield while suppressing bandits. Tin Nin Hao Fu became that woman's world. She killed my son and failed to raise my daughter. In the end, she even married my daughter to Gwen Kui to please her, causing my daughter to become frustrated and commit suicide. When my daughter passed away in anger, she still smiled and said, "Who told your mother that that short-lived woman used to intentionally make me lose face?" At that time, I only wished for a peaceful fate to have children, but she scolded me for not knowing how to be shameless. Luckily, God has eyes, she has lost her love, don't blame me. The new land was cruel, my heart was filled with hatred and regret. The soul, because of sky-high resentment, gradually disappears. When I regained consciousness, I discovered I was in the delivery room. Everything that just happened was like a dream, but when I heard the call of the ungrateful husband outside, I immediately knew that I was reborn. At this time, Ko-chan, a shameless person, was still awake and continued to speak loudly outside the window. "Madam, you are the seventh lady of the Marquis Palace. It is your duty to let me accept you as a concubine. Swang Mi is 7 months pregnant. Would you let the Marquis Palace's bloodline wander outside?" I pushed Xian Lam's hand down that was covering my ear and calmly said, "Let the Marquis and her come in here." Xian Lam quickly advised, "Madam, your body is important, don't get angry and harm yourself." See, even a maid knows that after giving birth, I can't be angry, I can't waste my energy. And my good husband, who was so bold when he proposed to me, is despicable to this extent. He knew that I had a say in the Marquis Palace, and was afraid that when I was still healthy, it would not be easy to force me, so he chose this time to force me. In his previous life, if he hadn't died suddenly, I'm afraid he and that woman would have trampled on my remains and lived happily. Just thinking about it makes my heart hurt like it's being torn apart. Xian Lam let them in. "Oh, there's this thing, you also need to go work outside." Ko Sin did not expect me to quickly agree and immediately pulled that woman in. "Madam, do you agree to let Swami into the palace?" That woman's name is Lu Swami, the niece of my mother-in-law. Growing up with my great-grandmother since childhood, our relationship was deep. Since it is my lord's wish, of course there is no reason to object. I looked at the overjoyed student, and saw the woman's shy expression, and immediately smiled. Be happy, royal law does not allow concubines to replace the main wife. Now that I have entered the palace to be a concubine, I will only be a concubine for the rest of my life. As for me, preserving my spirit and not arguing with them right now, taking good care of my body is important. In this life, when my husband dies, the days of winning alone and being free in the palace, it is my turn to experience them. Kosin was afraid that I would change my mind, so he quickly called someone to bring tea so that Lu Suamni could offer tea to me. There's no need to offer tea. My body is weak and I won't drink it anymore. If my parents came, they would sympathize. Of course I know what you're afraid of. My mother's family is a noble family, not comparable to the prestigious Tin Nin Hao Fu for 100 years. But my father is an emperor, has students all over the world, and still has influence in the court. Also because of this background, that year he did not dare to disobey the old servant's wishes, so he had to leave his childhood wife and son-in-law to marry me. It's just that he didn't expect that Kosin would be so greedy and insatiable that he would benefit from this marriage and still miss the person in his heart. In what world is there such a thing as having this and wanting that? I was willing to pretend to be generous and help him, just because I knew he didn't have much longer to live. After all, the more generous we are and the more we show tolerance for resentment, the easier it will be to take control of the marquis in the future. Kosin did not suspect anything at all, casually complimented me a few words for being gentle, then pulled Lu Suamni's hand, intending to leave. He said he wanted to take her to meet the old lady, and even chose a private hospital for her. From beginning to end, not a single question was asked about my health, nor did I care about the long-flung couple. Just started life, it's okay. Whether he noticed or not, these two children were still his eldest son and eldest daughter, that would never change. Before leaving, Master Lu glanced at me, his eyes somewhat suspicious. It's right to be skeptical, I'm inherently a narrow-minded person. Come on, wait until you're trying to live and die before you attack her. Not long after Kosin and Lu Suamni went out, there was a lot of noise outside. I immediately knew Xian Lam had returned and brought his father along. At this time, my mother gently comforted me. My daughter gave birth to the dragon and phoenix twins. She is a blessed person, good days are still ahead in the future. I smiled and replied, of course. Even though my mother didn't mention anything unpleasant, fearing that my thoughts would hurt my spirit, I knew everything was successful. During my free time, I heard from Xian Lam what had just happened. Kosin happily led Lu Suamni out of my hospital, when he bumped into an old slave carrying a bloody blanket, picked up a basin of water full of blood, and almost threw it all over Lu Suamni's body. Luckily, the baby caught her in time, but she was also scared until she turned pale. She couldn't stand this scene, so she immediately became angry and wanted to severely punish the person who did it. He also said he intended to return to my hospital to clarify everything. Who would have thought that at that moment my parents just arrived? No one informed the late student, so my father witnessed everything, witnessing the late student protecting a concubine in front of my hospital staff. He scolded me, demanding punishment, and loudly threatened to make me, who had just given birth, suffer a loss. According to Xian Lam, as soon as he saw his father, his face immediately turned pale and there was no blood left. Listening to this story, I laughed so much that I felt like the blood in my body was circulating more smoothly. Kosin underestimated my position in my parents' hearts. I didn't expect them to be so worried about me that they just waited for me to give birth before rushing to visit. He also did not expect that the servants in the Marquis Palace would be so loyal to me. It's not that I'm complacent, but from the moment I stepped into the Marquis Palace, managing the internal affairs, dealing with property, and clearly dealing out punishments to subordinates, I've been extremely generous in everything I've done. I told the gatekeeper in advance that my parents would come, so there was no need to report back. That's why no one came to tell him the news. Thanks to that, the old student's ugly face was exposed in broad daylight. After visiting me and looking at the sleeping twins, my father gently advised my children, "Please rest assured and take care of everything." These words made my eyes immediately turn red. That's right, our family is both strong and loves us to the core. Why should I destroy myself for someone who is about to die? After that day, my worried mother came to visit almost every day during her confinement. Still strong enough to leave 2 confidant nannies by my side. Ko-Sin and the old lady arrived, not even daring to utter a word of protest. Ko-Sin even specially visited me twice, but because I didn't want to meet him, they gradually learned to avoid someone like Ko-Sin who only wanted me to die early. Why do we need to show respect when we meet him? On the contrary, now we are just waiting for him to die. My mother said, "If you don't want to see him, I'll let him go out to work." I laughed and replied, "Yes, that's a good idea, mother." It's true that the older the ginger, the spicier it gets. I don't know what my father did. I only know that the next day he came to my room to inform me that he had to go out on duty. His attitude was much softer than before. She thought that when she brought Lu Suangmi into the palace, she could be together every day. Dream on, dare to force me to accept your concubine right in the delivery room. So don't blame my father for causing him trouble in court. As for the internal affairs, my mother handled everything for me, not letting me waste my energy. During the entire quarantine period, I was nourished until I was white and plump. Only when I was born did my mother allow me to take over the management of the palace. Because my mother had set foot in the backyard of Tin Nin Hao Fu, it made the old lady so angry that her face turned purple. But she couldn't do anything. Who told me to let my parents witness the destruction of my beloved concubine? In addition, her son was sent out to work. She didn't need to be told. That was my father's way of threatening her and her mother. Therefore, even if the old lady leads, she can only endure. As soon as my mother left, the old lady immediately couldn't control herself, summoned me to see her, and told me to bring the twins, saying she wanted to see her nephew and niece. Xian Lam frowned. Is this old lady looking for an opportunity to gain power? That's right, I smiled helplessly. Using the excuse of meeting you, he actually wanted to oppress me. Xian Lam reassured the lady, "Don't worry, the servant is here. Later, the servant will speak for you." Xian Lam is a person personally trained by his mother, whose purpose is only to protect me. I ordered nannies to carefully cover the 2 children, bringing along several healthy nannies. Even the maids chose the most intelligent and trustworthy ones. After that, a crowded line of people headed straight to the old lady's house. Seeing that group of people, the old lady's face immediately sank. She said in a low, sarcastic voice, "Is this daughter-in-law taking precautions against her mother-in-law? Why do you say that? You are the ancestor of these 2 children." I bowed softly, neither cold nor hot, but stopped the old lady's words. There are many things that can be done, but cannot be said. The old lady has acted, I cannot expose it, to avoid leaving an excuse for her to find fault. Bring you 2 here so I can take a look, the old lady just finished speaking. Master Lu standing next to her immediately showed a gloating look in his eyes. The baby is just 1 month old, so cute. Even with careful care, things can still go wrong. let alone handing it over to someone who is dissatisfied with me. The old lady understands this clearly, and I understand it even better. This is her way of deliberately reminding us. She is the grandmother of the two children. If she wants to do something bad, they will definitely not be able to escape. I ignored her words, just immediately moved closer to Lu Suangmi, holding her hand intimately, not giving her a chance to pull away. Smile gently, Sister Lu, don't be polite to me. Pregnant people like me don't need to perform rituals with you. Borrowing people, threatening to kill chickens, scaring monkeys, are these tricks only the old lady knows how to use? She is the grandmother of the two children, but I am the mother of the Maquis. If this old lady dares to take action against my child, then don't blame me for taking action against your concubine. Lu Suangni's face turned pale and she quickly hugged her stomach. She continuously sent her eyes for help towards the old lady. I pretended not to see, and gently signaled Nanny not to listen. The old lady said she wanted to see her grandchild, so why did she quickly bring Heini here for everyone to see? This is my answer to the trick the old lady just used. Unexpectedly, the old lady was so angry that she didn't want to pretend anymore. Immediately stood up and said angrily, "Who gave you such courage? If you have any fate, I will definitely not leave you alone. She is my mother-in-law, and it is not convenient for her to openly oppose her, so she just keeps her eyes down and remains silent." But Xian Lam immediately spoke up for me. "Look what the old lady said. Do you blame our wife?" Looking at it like this, if anyone didn't know, they would think that Lu Di Noang was the matriarch of the palace. And our wife is nothing. The old lady frowned, her expression even more uncomfortable. "Master is talking, how can a servant dare to interrupt? Is this the rule that the Qin family taught you?" Xian Lam was not afraid at all, raised his eyes and glanced at Lu Duongni, smiling coldly. Of course it cannot compare to the regulations of Tin Nin Hao Fu. When our wife was in the queue room, her reputation was always good, and rules were always the top priority. For the old lady, he was even more respectful. Even when pregnant, she still persisted in coming to visit him every day. Not to mention Our Lady was just in the delivery room and agreed to let a pregnant woman like Lu Di Noang enter the door before entering the palace. That alone is worthy of the word Hien Tuk. Lu Suangni's face became even more unsightly, but Xian Lam did not stop and continued to speak. But compared to Lu Di Noang, our wife is truly unstoppable. Lu Di Noang relied on the fact that she was favored by the Maquis and conceived a child, but did not bother to perform rituals with the mother-in-law. The old lady is a person who values rules. Does this rule only apply to our ladies? Only when the old lady was so angry that her face turned pale did I softly speak. "This girl has a big mouth. I hope my mother will forgive me. It's not as heavy as she said." I drank tea and recognized Lu Di Noang as a member of the same family. Of course, we also have to take care of her a little. At this point, the old lady's expression finally changed. She heard the threat in my words. If she wants to use my child to oppress me, then don't blame me for taking action against Lu Duongni. In the backyard of this Marquis Palace, I am the official wife, in charge of the inner court, and the person in charge of the estate. The old lady can protect Lu Suangmi for a day, but can she prevent everything from happening for the rest of her life? If you really anger me, there are countless ways for me to deal with Lu Suangmi. The old lady gradually calmed down, then looked disappointed and left. I have long known that you, Qin, are arrogant, rely on your parents for support, and don't care about me. If that's the case, then I don't have the blessing of being your mother-in-law. You don't need to be respectful. In the future, don't come to asking. Let's just say there isn't a mother-in-law like me in this palace. These words weigh 1,000 pounds. I can't help but admit, I was a bit surprised. This has gone beyond the level of an internal quarrel, but is also a direct insult to the face of our parents. The fate and future of the deceased are in the hands of my father. Yet the old lady behaved like that, just to protect Lu Suangmi, to the point of not caring about mother and child's feelings. Why is it just because Lu Suangmi is her maternal granddaughter, or because she is pregnant? But when I was pregnant, the old lady did not show any emotion. Isn't it said that the old lady even values Lu Suangmi more than her own son? While I was still thinking, Lu Suni took the opportunity to leave my hand and hide behind the old lady. She looked as if she had been slandered by me, but her eyes clearly showed a bit of pride as she pretended to speak. Your mother is still here. Before you were my aunt, now you are my mother. It's okay if a sister doesn't respect others. From now on, I have children to take care of you. After hearing this, the old lady immediately changed her expression and gently stroked her head. However, I immediately knew you were a good person. Trying to have a child is her blessing. The way she was considerate and her words were gentle, I didn't know that I thought the two of them were truly mother and daughter. I carefully observed the lines on both of their faces. Suddenly, there was a resounding drumbeat in my heart. I vaguely felt like I had just grasped something. Not daring to think any further, I hastily said goodbye and went back to my hospital. My heart cannot calm down. I discovered something that I had seriously overlooked before. My late friend's death was extremely unusual. In his previous life, after solemnly marrying Lu Suangmi, not long after he died outside the palace, I used to think it was heaven's retribution because he had harmed me. But in fact, after his death, many strange things happened at Tin Nin Hao Fu. For example, the deceased's tablet was not placed in the Ko family shrine, for the reason that he died in battle and carried great resentment, so he had to be sent to the temple for salvation. Or even though I was born a man, Master Lu also gave birth to a son, but the Ko family still requested to adopt another child from the relatives to inherit the title of Marquis. Even when Lu Suangmi killed both of my children, my relatives did not react at all. Based on recent interactions with the Ko family, we know that they extremely value the family's descendants, and absolutely will not let a stepmother arbitrarily hurt the main descendants. The strangest thing is that my parents did not intervene. This is not reasonable. My parents love me to the core, and will definitely love both of their grandchildren. Unless there's something that prevents them from coming out. The suspected seed has germinated. We immediately started investigating. In the past, I was very tolerant towards you. After all, I am the seventh lady, married properly, and gave birth to a pair of dragon and phoenix fetuses. As long as we don't make mistakes, no one can surpass our position. Moreover, I also know that he is about to die, and when he dies, he will leave me a prestigious palace. The inheritance is huge, so with a dead person, there is no need to compare it. But if his existence threatens the future of prosperity and safety of my children, then that is a different story. After that day, I asked father to investigate. Not long after, mother used the excuse of wanting to visit her grandchild and called me back to my mother's house. As soon as I walked through the door, my mother hugged me and sobbed, "My poor daughter, why did you fall into that wolf's den and tiger's mouth?" It's all because my parents were blind and didn't investigate carefully, so they let you marry someone who is neither human nor demon. Hearing that, I knew my guess was correct. A feeling of both bitterness and myth arose in my heart. "Father, do you have real evidence?" Parents sighed. Initially investigating the late student, nothing was found, but your mother suggested looking into Lu Suangmi. Yet I discovered many things. The corner of my lips curled up into a cold smile. In his previous life, right after trying to marry Lu Suang-ni, he passed away early. Come on, if you knew that the treasure you were protecting was the talisman of your destiny, would you still cherish her so much? As for the old lady, which side will you choose between the late student and Lu Suang-ni? Returning to Tin Nin Hao Fu, I kept a quiet attitude, only focusing on taking care of my two children. My twins, especially my son, Ko Yen, were born weak and needed a lot of care. Until Lu Suang-ni was due to give birth, the mother quickly rode back on her horse, running at night to the point that 2 horses lost their strength and died on the road. Seeing me standing outside the delivery room, she immediately became alert. Why are you here? If you dare to do anything to Suang-ni right now, I will not forgive you. Look, he actually understood that I was weak and couldn't stand excitement, but he was still able to force me to accept his concubine in front of the delivery room door. It seems that at that time, he really wanted to force me to death. What can we do? My Marquis is the 7th lady of the Marquis Palace. Lu Di Noang is responsible for the Marquis Palace. Of course I have to care. I smiled at him as if I didn't notice his guard. Thinking back, before publicizing his relationship with Lu Suang-ni, he was also very good at hiding it. Even had a sweet time with me. I used to think he was genuinely kind to me, but because of what he forced me to do in the delivery room, I was heartbroken. Looking back now, I just feel ridiculous for the stupid feelings that once arose in my heart. But now, all those feelings have completely turned into anger and hatred. Ko-sin, if you die, maybe it will be better. Under the close observation of the late student and the old lady, Lu Suang-ni, like her previous life, gave birth to a healthy baby boy, named Ko-tan. Right when the family of 4 was at their happiest, I sent someone to inform them that relatives of the Lu family were coming to visit. The radiant faces of the old lady and the late student immediately darkened. As for Lu Suang-ni, on the contrary, she seemed very happy. You are Lu Suang-ni's mother and her younger brother. It turns out that her mother is also the old lady's sister-in-law, Chu-ti. But the old lady did not welcome it at all. The great-uncle explained to me, the great-uncle passed away early, and the mother and the great-uncle were not very close. I sat there, smiling without saying another word, just doing my duty as the 7th lady. Carefully arrange for long-distance relatives to visit. I'm familiar with these kinds of things, so everything is handled well, making Chu-ti very satisfied, regardless of whether the old lady is happy or not. Chu-ti and her son still pretended not to know and happily stayed. Not long after, the old lady, who had been cold towards me since the previous quarrel, suddenly called me over. She got angry and scolded, "You poor people, why are you pretending to be so welcoming? You have too much money and don't know where to spend it, right?" Hearing that, I just smiled and replied, "Aren't they your relatives and Sister Liu's mother? Of course we shouldn't let people blame us." These words made the old lady's throat choke, and for a moment she couldn't say anything. After a while, she reluctantly ordered, "We can take good care of Suang-ni in the palace. As for the others, you think of a way to send them home." She was in such a hurry that she didn't even bother to hide it anymore. Sending your family away like that, doesn't it clearly show that there's something going on between them? When you are chaotic, you often do foolish things. At this time, I pretended to be naive and asked the old lady, "Is there any problem between you and Mrs. Chu?" The old lady immediately fell silent. I immediately pretended to be embarrassed. "Old lady, I'm just a junior, it's not convenient for me to interfere in matters between elders. Yenni's health is not good, I have to go home and take care of my younger brother." As soon as I left the old lady's house, I met my old friend who came to look for me. He said, "Madam doesn't know, because that aunt's character is really worrying." My cousin is addicted to gambling and alcohol every day. Being close to them is not a good thing. It would be better if you chased them away sooner. In the end, they all want me to be the bad guy so they can keep their good reputation. Yes, wishful thinking. I calmly asked back, then why did you marry your aunt's daughter? Are you not afraid that Lu Suangni is not a good person? Ko Sin immediately objected, how can Suangni be like them? She grew up in our house, raised by my family. I smiled faintly and couldn't help but ask, since that's the case, you and your cousin have a deep relationship, why are you still marrying me? Ko Sin only coldly left behind a sentence, Tantu, you are already the wife of Tin Nin Hao Fu, don't let yourself encroach on her. When I returned, looking at the twins playing on the bed, my heart grew cold. This was the last chance I had for my late son, but he didn't know how to take it. Who said I'm both beautiful and greedy? If I just want to gain momentum, what can you do to me? After thinking for a while, I turned around to meet Mrs. Chu. While she and her son Lu Duong were constantly looking at the luxury of the Marquis Palace, I walked over and placed a check for 3,000 taels in front of them. This is the government's monthly expenses, but for Lu and her child, it is a huge amount of money. Lu Duong's eyes immediately lit up like golden sparks. Mrs. Chu pretended to refuse. No, it's too much, ma'am, please put it back. I smiled shyly and replied, I'm just passing on the message. This is what my husband told me to give. He said everyone is family. Now seeing that my aunt has suffered a lot, I just want to help. Mrs. Zhou rolled her eyes, clearly calculating in her heart. Really, did the late student give it to me? I nodded innocently, that's right, husband really appreciates Sister Lu, and really treats your family well. Hearing that, Mrs. Chu smiled brightly, if I had known this early. I should have come a long time ago. The ceremony also laughed. This blessing is finally our turn to enjoy. Looking at them, I feel even more similar. It's just a pity that she was born on a normal day and doesn't like to laugh. I just didn't understand, still maintaining the appearance of a genuine seventh lady, honestly not interfering in things that shouldn't be asked. When it comes to us, this work is considered finished, but for the deceased's side, it has only just begun. In recent days, my parents have always quietly helped me monitor and regularly send me news. In winter, when the weather gets colder and colder, this time in our previous life was the time when we were destined to die. But this time the person who died was Mrs. Chu, and the one who took action was the deceased. Even her son, the altar boy, was tortured by him to the point of death, barely surviving. This caused a huge uproar, so even though he was angry, he was still arrested by the police. At this time, the old lady personally came to my hospital. Just a month after Lady Chu entered the Marquis Palace, her pancreas had lost a lot of its juices, like an old tree with no vitality. She pointed at my face, her voice bitter, you know, right? I called Xian Lam, picked up the two children and left, and told the servants to retreat. Slowly looking at the old lady, not knowing what her mother-in-law was saying. So surely you already know everything. The old lady repeated this guess, her voice full of stubbornness, her face wrinkled to a terrifying degree. You gave Lu Duong money to gamble. Chu Ti is also what you came to find. Even trying to commit a crime is all your trick. Tan Ti, you are an independent woman, marrying you into my family is a disaster for 8 generations. This is my institute, there is no one else. I didn't even bother to act, just smiled faintly, that's right, so what if I did it? If you want to retire me, what excuse are you going to use? This is the old student who was pushed to the limit by Chu Ti and her mother. He couldn't bear it and killed his relatives. What does it have to do with us? The old lady's eyes widened like a frog, wishing she could devour me alive, feeling like she saw death before her eyes and couldn't do anything. Now she too was covered with candles. Her lips trembled, her voice choked up. If something happens to you, do you think you can rest in peace? I have a way to drag you down to hell. I believe this, the old lady really has that ability. Not based on her position or ability, but from the old woman herself. Actually, the old lady has a big secret that she has kept hidden until now. Ko-Sin is not the old lady's biological child. Marquis Liu's son is the child she personally gave birth to. As for Chu Ti and Lu Duong, they are the biological mother and younger brother of the deceased. I don't know why they swapped identities that year, but in this lifetime, Tin Nin Hao Fu only had one heir, a late generation. He also guessed somewhat. Perhaps the old lady was confident that after trying to marry Lu Suangni, their whole family would reunite. Unfortunately, the previous generation's late Marquis probably didn't know about this, so he intervened and chose me to be his main wife. Later, when Lu Suangni publicly entered the palace, I deliberately took Chu Ti and Lu Duong to the capital. I intentionally increased the ambitions of Chu Ti and Lu Duong so that they could see the wealth of Tin Nin Hao Fu, causing them to use her status as a threat, gradually forcing her into a dead end. In the end, he had no choice but to kill his immediate family. Coincidentally, I arranged for someone to catch me red-handed on the spot, and caused this matter to spread throughout the capital. This is indeed a dangerous game, but compared to letting the late student's true identity be exposed to the Ko family and then the whole family being executed, it is better to let him die for this crime. At least it won't affect the backgrounds of my two children. I'm betting that the old lady values her own glory and wealth more, and values her son even more. At this time, facing the old lady's sharp scolding, I remained calm and unfazed. Lu Suangni just gave birth to a baby boy, right? Even though he is only a male servant of the Marquis Palace, he can still rely on his ancestors' blessings to earn a good position. If you choose the academic path, your birth mother can also help you a little. You are the old lady of the Marquis Palace. You have a grandson to continue the family line. As long as the Marquis Palace is still alive, you will of course take care of them and manage the internal affairs. I can't say how good he is, but he certainly won't let the Marquis government decline. Hearing these words, the old lady's face continuously changed. I'm not in a hurry, I just slowly finished drinking a cup of tea. Finally, the old lady's shoulders slumped. She looked at me with helpless eyes. What are you going to do? Ko-Sin was caught in the act and made such a big deal out of it. I'm afraid I won't even be able to keep my temper. I calmly replied, you are so confused. This is because the deceased was forced into a dead end by stupid relatives. It was just an act of self-defense. To the deceased, the people and the saints often have some mercy. The old lady was stunned, her eyes widened, and she stammered and asked, are you planning to? I just smiled and didn't answer. Whatever the truth is, both she and I are clear in our hearts. Dear mother, this is the last way, also the only way that can preserve the palace. Honestly speaking, I don't want to let the deceased's true identity be exposed. If something happens to the Marquis pretending to be the old lady, I won't be called the Marquis of the Marquis, I will also become a laughingstock. My two children won't even have the chance to inherit the title of Marquis. Even if the matter is revealed, in the end, my two children and I still have a family to rely on for the rest of our lives, no worries. As for the old lady, the one who exchanged porridge for the descendants of the Ko family, will definitely receive a harsher punishment. Even a weak flower like Lu Suangni can hardly escape a disastrous fate. I can bet, but the old lady doesn't dare. At this moment, the old lady gasped, speechless, just stammering, but. What should I do? I calmly pointed to one person and said, This female doctor knows about pharmacology. She can definitely help this old lady. Just as we expected, the next day, he fell ill in the photo shoots section. His illness was both rapid and serious, and he passed away in less than 3 days. Before he died, he left a letter confessing his guilt, admitting that he had murdered his aunt and cousin. But every word also reveals the greed and constant pressure of Chu Ti and her mother. Immediately after that, there were rumors that Lu Duong, in a gambling addiction, used the name of Tin Nin Marquis to borrow a huge amount of money, up to 10,000 taels. In the letter, the late student mentioned his relationship with his maternal family, and at the same time expressed that because he loved Lu Suangni, he could not resist Lu Duong's threat and finally resisted. In desperation that led to murder, even though he tried to kill, he was forced. Again he admitted his guilt and died in prison with my father's intervention. The emperor was not angry at leaving the marquis's position, just find him a little money and let the matter settle down. The old lady cried bitterly, constantly blaming herself for killing her son, and also demanded to cut off relations with the Lu family. The Ko family also went to Tin Nin Hao Fu many times. Every time I have a secret meeting with the old lady, I sometimes come to see me. Anyway, the death of the late student is very suspicious. It is impossible for people to doubt me. Plays the role of a royal family who is cold, but thanks to the power of her mother's family, she can maintain her position. Of course I don't know anything. The old lady called me over several times, using threatening words to force me to take the blame for her, but I no longer looked as arrogant as before. Just show a weak, resentful look and ask what the person is saying. What daughter-in-law knows anything? That's right, I arranged the person, but the one who poisoned her was the old lady. In the past, she had the audacity to change the status of her descendants in the family, so whoever caused bad karma must end it themselves, right? Finally, the old lady could not bear the pressure and came to my hospital for the last time. Chin Su, do you dare to swear that in this life you will not harm Bone Ni and will treat her child well? Not long after I made this vow, the old lady also passed away due to serious illness. The outside story is told that the old lady was heartbroken over her son's death and became ill, and was ashamed of the poor ancestors of Tin Nin Hao Palace, so she became ill with anger and soon left the world. In the end, all the resentment that originated from the Lu family was finally completely closed. Even though his great-grandfather died, he died with the title of Marquis, meaning his position still remains. His and my eldest son, Ko Yen, naturally became the future crown prince who will inherit the throne. With my parents' backs, I overcame the pressure from the Ko family and firmly held the entire Tin Nin Hao Fu. After firmly grasping power, I welcomed Lu Suangni's son to raise. As for herself, she was imprisoned for 2 years, then sent to a suburban manor. There, what she did to my daughter in her previous life, I returned to her without missing a single bit. I forced her to put the bag on her head and stand for hours in the room. In my free time, I sweep the yard and do laundry. I also told all my servants to only feed her and not be allowed to come near her. At one point, Lu Suangni couldn't bear it anymore and loudly scolded me, but I simply smiled, using the excuse that I was just teaching her to get away with it, exactly the same reason she used to torture my daughter. Although the Ko family's relatives came by a few times, everything in the palace had been arranged satisfactorily. Lu Suangni stays on the farm every day, is well fed, and is plump and white. Except not being happy, there is nothing missing. As for her status as a concubine, her status was not much higher than that of a servant. Now that she is dead, I still give her a place to live, without beating or torturing her, which is already too merciful. Gradually, I stopped paying attention to her. Lu Suangni completely fell into the situation of calling heaven and earth without understanding, calling the earth without knowing. All her life she dreamed of entering the royal palace and living a rich and glorious life, but from now on she could only languish in poverty on a poor farm, ending the rest of her life. The day I sent Lu Suangni away, my mother came to visit me and said, "Why is my child so smart? Living in a puddle of corruption and still finding a way, my child is truly a person of great blessing." I wanted to laugh along with my mother's praise, but looking at the two children who were able to run and jump in the yard, tears couldn't help but fall. The present happy days of victory are the price paid with the lives of all three of us in our previous lives. But think again, the hardships are over, there are only good days ahead. I laughed again. Yes, good days are ahead. Side story, Khotan. Khotan was the second son of Tin Nin Hao Fu, son of Lu Suangni. He and his brother Koyan, my son, both abandoned the martial arts path passed down from the Marquis Palace and chose to study literature and study at Kwok Tu Jiam. This is very suitable for my father. He was an honest writer, treated the two children fairly, and devotedly guided them. I hate Ko Mang, I also hate Lu Suangni, but I have taught Khotan seriously. Under my upbringing, he became an upright young man, completely different from those two shameless people. At the age of 19, Tan expressed that he did not want to continue studying for exams. He wants to put his love into the mountains and water and learn to draw. I chatted with him all night and then agreed to that somewhat extravagant request. So Khotan left Kwok Tu Jiam, lived happily and freely every day, even opened a small painting shop, living a peaceful and poetic life. One day, Xian Lam, now my child's nanny, said that Lu Suangni had run away from the farm. I'm not surprised either. At the farm, I don't plan to be too strict with her, but I also don't let her be idle. At least, she has to work to have food. She always did not dare to run away because she knew that on the farm, she still had a way to live and food to eat. If she left there, she would only have to starve to death on the street. This time she dared to run away. I also know the reason. Because Lu Suangni went to find Khotan. That day, Khotan actually met an old, hunched woman who imitated his painting shop. Years of living in poverty have completely destroyed the beauty that once made her proud, turning her into a ruined person, with no trace of her former fragile loveliness left. But Khotan only looked once and immediately recognized her. Lu Suangni shed tears, tremblingly reaching out her hand to hold him. "My son, Tan Ni, I am your biological mother." Khotan let her hold his hand, not resisting, but not getting close either. He just asked faintly, "You should be at the farm, why are you looking for me?" Lu Suangni looked at him in surprise. "I live in such misery, shouldn't you take me home to take care of me?" Lips faintly said, "Now the Marquis still supports people and he just calmly told the truth," but Lu Suangni was agitated. "Tantu, you're clearly mocking me. Tan Ni, you don't know how evil that woman is. As soon as your father passed away, she snatched you and even chased me out of the palace." Khotan interrupted, "You are a concubine, it is normal for the main family to chase you away." Lu Suangni looked at him as if he didn't know him. "Tan Ni, I am your biological mother, how could you think like that?" Khotan changed his approach and asked, "Did my father force you to be my concubine?" Lu Suangni was confused. "Your father and I are childhood sweethearts, first love. When he was alive, he was so kind to me, from clothes to things, everything was better than Tantu, that bastard Tantu." Lu Suangni quickly explained, but did not realize that the last pity in Khotan's eyes had disappeared. Khotan interrupted her, "Then why didn't father marry someone but instead married my mother?" Lu Suangni stammered, "That was the late Marquis' order, so you had a secret relationship with my father without any official agreement." Lu Suangni's face immediately turned pale, the blood on her face seemed to drain. The questioning words from her own son were like a strong slap in her face. Lu Suangmi shouted, "Forgive me. Is it Tan who told you that?" "It was her. She intentionally spread lies, misled you and made you feel evil." "Shut up. Don't be rude to my mother." Khotan once again interrupted her. His cold eyes did not hide his anger. Faced with Lu Suangmi's anger and blame, he had no patience. "My mother treated me extremely well, no different from her own child. I have never lacked anything that big brother and big sister have. You raised me, taught me to understand manners, to be shameless. That's why I feel so humiliated." Khotan looked at her, his eyes burning. "I am the second child, but only 2 months younger than my eldest brother and eldest sister. I am the living proof of my father's and grandmother's betrayal of my mother. My father is unfaithful, and my grandmother is shameless." He continued, each word cutting like a knife. "You said it wasn't a secret relationship, so did my mother accept you as a concubine as soon as I got married?" Lu Suangmi staggered, her lips trembled. "Son, you can't think about your mother like that. You've done shameful things. Why can't you let others say it? If only people had more self-respect and didn't make themselves dirty, they wouldn't be so miserable. It would even implicate me. It's not what you think." Lu Suangmi could only shake her head continuously in denial. "That's not true." "So what?" Khotan asked, but this time she couldn't say anything more. She could only stay silent. After many years of witnessing the upheavals of the Ko family, she also vaguely guessed some things, but could not admit them. Those who knew this secret all kept their mouths shut forever. Lu Suangmi had no choice but to cry. "Tan deliberately deceived you, wanting to divide our motherly relationship. Tan Ni, I am your biological mother, I gave birth to you." Khotan took a step back and calmly replied, "I only have one mother, the one who raised and taught me. My mother treated me well, found a wife for me, helped me get married. I cannot disappoint her. In the future I will take care of her, be by her side, the last part of my journey, and be filial to her." After Lu Suangmi heard, her whole body trembled and she fainted. Khotan only sent someone to take her back to the farm, and from then on he sent her another 2 taels of silver every month, but never visited her again. Having money in hand, Lu Suangmi's spirit is increasingly depressed. It seemed like all hope in her life was gone. Less than 2 years later, she passed away. Hearing the news, Khotan came to see me, bowed his head to apologize, and then arranged a simple but kind funeral for her. From then on, he never mentioned her again. Khotan only married one wife his entire life, but because his wife's health was not good, they had no children. After his wife died, he did not remarry. He once said, "What I hate most are unfaithful men. The Ko family's witnessing profession ends with me."